In sociology, deviance is the violation of social rules and conventions. Different social groups count different acts as deviance.
There are two ways of thinking about social deviance. The first way is an absolutist's way of thinking. This way labels an act as deviant regardless of the context. An absolutist thinks an act is deviant in all cases and that their way is the only right way. For example, a doctor thinking smoking is wrong regardless of who smokes or why they smoke.
The book defines constructivist theory as not the quality of the act a person commits, but rather the consequence of the application by others of rules and sanctions to an offender. From this perspective, the question of deviance is a question of labeling. The construction of deviance requires four things. Deviance is also created through interactions and the quality of those interactions. In the U.S., a societal norm is to shake someone's hand when you meet them. Kissing someone when you first meet them would be an example of deviant behavior that would instantly ruin the quality of that social interaction. Additionally, when something or someone is labeled as deviant, there is always an audience that has labeled them.
Maintaining deviance shows people who belongs in a society and who doesn't, and ultimately strengthens the unity and social order of a particular group. Those who label others as deviant have a certain amount of social power that allows them to do so. We can also look at deviance through the lens of gender roles. In the U.S., it is generally socially acceptable for a woman to cry in public in response to an emotional situation, and this has been relatively accepted throughout our history. However, just 60 years ago, it would have been unacceptable for a man to be seen crying in public, and others around him would have considered it an act that deviated from social norms. However, for deviation to exist, you need context. And in this context, a male in the 1950s is expected by society to show weakness less frequently than a woman. In today's context, however, this act is no longer considered deviant by society, and it would not be deviant by today's standards to see a man crying when his favorite team loses the championship or at his daughter's wedding, for example.
With social deviance comes punishment. The punishment can range anywhere from a stern look from a passerby, an unwanted interaction or being shunned, and, if the deviance is illegal, a fine or jail time.
Different cultures have different formal and informal sanctions for various acts of deviance. One example of this is with women's dress codes. In the U.S., if a woman walks down the street in shorts and a swimsuit top, she might get distasteful looks and experience informal sanctions from an audience for her actions. Yet, if a woman in Iran were to do the same thing, she would face formal sanctions like jail or execution by the government because Iranian women must adhere to the dress code in their particular society and what they expect. To conclude, in order to understand deviance, we must first understand socialization, social order, and social control. Once we understand how our society expects us to behave, we can begin to understand why people deviate from those expectations. Deviance is only possible because of norms, contexts, interactions, and punishment. And the presence of deviance is a social construct that has existed throughout history and will continue to exist across all societies for years to come.